Hello, and welcome back to Everyday Writers and our February episode, Author Spotlight with Jenna Beall Mueller. I'm Crystal McQueen,
I'm Jordan S. Keller.
and we're so excited to welcome you to the program. Jenna is the author of a cozy romance novel, Pop Fizz Clink, focusing on a Cincinnati woman who just turned 30 and is discovering what life can look like after being diagnosed with MS. Jenna, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited to chat tonight.
So I quickly devoured your book, Jenna. I loved it. B. Parker, who's the heroine of Pop Fizz Clink, she has a very fun voice. And while reading it, felt like I was sitting across from B the whole time, just listening to her tell me these stories. Can you kind of let us know how you establish that voice and how much, if any, is you?
Absolutely. The very early drafts of this manuscript were actually told from both B and Maddie's perspectives because I feel like I'm a little bit of both of the sisters. And then once I realized that it was my MS story I wanted to tell, I thought B would be a better vessel for it, and Maddie became more of a secondary character. Um, I would say B's inner monologue is a lot of how I think. I'm really inspired by, growing up, I loved and I still love reading like Sophie Kinsella. And I love the Princess Diaries series by Meg Cabot. And especially Princess Diaries, that was one of the first series I read that all these like pop culture references were included. And that's something that's reflected in my writing. And I like how Sophie Kinsella is very conversational, dialogue heavy. And so the voice is just kind of exactly how I think my inner monologue most of the day.
Well, so you're talking about how much you relate to the character, and I love how much this book incorporates the realities of being diagnosed with MS, and shows how that B continues to live her life, albeit a little bit differently. So, Jenna, can you tell us a little bit about some of the research that you did when preparing for this book, and how much of your own experiences are incorporated into your writing?
Absolutely. So B's diagnosis story pretty closely mirrors my own. And then I thought I had finished this draft back in 2020, and it's now 2025. and and so as
I
my
relate to
MS,
that. I have some
right?
books that are that old, so keep going.
Oh my gosh. I mean, like, I could go a whole other rabbit hole because I wrote this manuscript originally with my former agent who really help it become what it is. But my research has largely been my own experience. And then, of course, internet research, my own MS friends bringing their experiences in as well. And something I was really anxious about was I didn't want to misrepresent the disease because it is so different for every single person. And so anytime have like a medical reference, I would like go and I would like find like five sources that backed it up because it'd be something I wrote in my notebook, like, oh, my neurologist told me this. And then I would really panic, like, what if I'm misremembering what she said? And so I would go and I would just find all these different sources to make sure I wasn't like spreading false information, which there's so much of these days. And so everything has been fact checked, but B's MS is definitely based on my own because mine was caught early. And being diagnosed with MS today is so different than even just 10 years ago because the research is well funded and there are just like myriad of therapies and medications available. So if you're going to be diagnosed with MS, it's a great time.
It's super funny you say that as a type 1 diabetic. We're in that same boat. Like, if you're gonna get it now.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Which I mean, no one should be getting anything, but it's the time.
It's the time. It's like, 'cause I feel like people who were diagnosed just 20 years ago often ended up in wheelchairs or using canes. And that's just like much rarer these days because of these therapies. And I'm just so appreciative that there is so much funding that goes into the research. And I'm obsessed with my neurologist. I put her in my acknowledgments as one of my heroes because she's just the greatest.
You mentioned an earlier version of Pop Fizz Clink being told by the two sisters in their POVs, and I know you've mentioned that it only transpired through the course of one evening party. Can you kind of talk about how you decided to change from just those couple of hours to a couple of weeks in your novel, and then kind of the process of writing that out?
Oh my gosh, you guys, I rewrote this book so many times, and there were like drafts that I was just in tears because, like, I would think, like, I got it right. And then my agent would write back and be like, nope, like, total rewrite again and again. Um, so, in high school, I loved the Anne Patchett book, Bel Canto. And it doesn't take place over a single evening, but it does take place over this short amount of time where, all these guests are being held hostage in this party, this grand party room, and or the vice president's residence. Anyways, I was like, what if I have a snowstorm come in and it strands all of these guests at an engagement party for the night? And so it was like my rom-com version, and it was, I can't believe I wrote like 100,000 words about like one night, but I did. And oh gosh, it wasn't good. They were not good 100,000 words. So it's so funny. The only part of that original manuscript that there's any like resemblance to in this final one is the engagement party chapter, which is like 1,000 words. And even that is totally different. I think it's just the gift opening scene I kept. So it's like 200 words of that original.
How much
But it
about
took
your
men, it
characters
took
when you
so
write
many
that way?
drafts.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. It took so many drafts to get from that single evening to, a few weeks.
Well, but I do think that like when people write, they think that like I wrote words on the page, I have to keep them. But you learn so much about your characters and all of that writing. So even if you throw it away, you you've created depth among your characters and stuff like that. And I'm the queen of throwing away words. So like I relate to your story so very much.
But Crystal, I love to hear that because I'm going through the same thing right now where this new manuscript I'm writing, I technically have like two drafts that are done, maybe 90,000 words. And now I'm just rewriting it again. It's almost like I have to write a book to like get to know my characters.
No,
Uh,
I totally relate to that. I have three completed manuscripts that I am in the sixth rewrite of the one that I'm working on right now. So like I feel you so much. Um, but just talking about different things that you were mentioning your agent in your acknowledgments, you mentioned that another author influenced your decision on how to publish and where to market your book. Can
yeah.
you take us through the ups and downs for that? Because it sounded like in your acknowledgments that you were kind of on the fence of which way to go.
Oh, absolutely. So I signed with my former agent in 2018. And while we were together, I did a work for hire romance novel. Horrible experience. I'm pretty sure that's what like kicked off my MS because it was so stressful. It was for Grand Central Publishing. And basically, I was given a chapter by chapter outline of what should happen in this book. And then I just had to like speed write. And what was so crushing was I was putting all my energy into this work for hire novel while the novel I really cared about was on submission and being rejected, but very kindly. And after that, my agent sold six children's books for me, which was awesome. And then that publisher came back and asked for another installment of that children's series. So, again, wonderful. But around that same time, we went on submission with this manuscript, Pop Fizz Clink, which used to be called Close to Home, but my former agent changed that. And so once we were no longer working together, I was like, I'm going back to my original title. Um, but it was a really weird submission process because this time around we weren't really hearing back from any editors. And if I hadn't gone on submission with her before, I wouldn't have even known it was different and weird. And so then finally I was kind of like, hey, like something going on. And it turned out she was being sued by a former
Oh no.
client. And for the former client was accusing her of taking her ideas and feeding them to another one of her authors,
Oh my gosh.
which I don't think is the case having read the lawsuit, but like it obviously was like a major distraction of her time and energy. Um, and I had to kind of like think with my head rather than my heart because we did have a good personal relationship. And I was like, you know what? She hasn't sold any of my women's fiction manuscripts, which is what I really want to do. So I ended the contract and I was sitting on, this B manuscript and I was like, well, I can't query other agents with this because it's already technically been shopped around by this former agent. Um, and so I was like noodling on the idea of like indie publishing. And then the Bookery put out their like top 10 bestsellers of 2023. And the number one bestseller was Jessica Booth's A Match Made in Autumn. And so I clicked to her profile and I was like, oh my gosh, she's an indie author. Like people can do this. And so Jessica has just been so kind and generous with her time and her knowledge and everything she has learned. And that's just something I found with the whole like indie author community. It's the exact opposite of when I was, working in the traditional publishing space. It felt like there were a lot of gatekeepers, a lot of topics you were not supposed to talk about, a lot of secrecy, I guess I would say. And it was really refreshing to enter like the indie space and be like, oh, everyone is just like really helpful and forthcoming and just kind of cheering each other on. I do think I will probably flip flop back to trying to find an agent for this next manuscript, but it's been a wonderful experience putting B and Pop Fizz Clink out into the world because I don't know what I would have done with it otherwise, and I didn't want it to just sit in Google Docs and die.
Like dust in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah, I was like, I want to get this story out. So it's been a really happy surprise for sure.
You missed the new manuscript. So what's next for Jenna? What are you working on now?
Yeah, so my next manuscript is called Still in Cincinnati, and it's about a food writer who works for like a major grocery store chain, which will be fictional. And she gets offered this job at this small, like upstate New York little like artisan cheese company. And she has to decide if she's going to leave not only her like family and friends here in Cincinnati, but she has this like perfect on paper boyfriend who has like a lot of yellow flags. But again, perfect on paper. He's like a vegetarian firefighter, the dream. And so it's going to be this whole like push and pull of is, the grass greener on the other side? Is the grass greener where you water it? Maybe you just want different grass. A lot of like motherhood themes. This was first inspired by my husband and I were playing around with the idea of moving to Philadelphia. This was years ago, and my mom lost her mind. You would have thought I said we were moving like across the world, like literally like Pennsylvania and Ohio touch. Yeah. Like it's not that far. And I'll never forget, she the next morning after we told her, she called and she was like, I sobbed all night. Dad was up all night too. And I was like, well, yeah, if someone's sobbing next to you, like I'm sure you're not gonna sleep. So that kind of like kicked off the whole thought process for that novel, and just how hard it can be leaving your hometown. And I like to describe it as the reverse Hallmark movie, because instead of like big city gal, goes home and reunites with their high school boyfriend, it's going to be like mid-sized Midwestern gal decides if she wants to like uproot her life in her 30s and start fresh somewhere new.
Love it. Love it.
I really like the leading man. He's like this like Adirondack, like lumberjack type, like beard, single dad, but has like a very positive relationship with his ex. Very healthy, like emotionally mature man.
All green flags.
All
So
green flags. Yeah.
clearly fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
No.
So that sounds wonderful, and I cannot wait to read it. Jenna, thank you so much for being on our show this month. Where can people find out more about you, your writing, and maybe where to pick up your books? I know you mentioned the Bookery, but is there other places they can get it?
Oh my gosh, I love the Bookery.
Me too.
Also, yes, the Book Matters in Milford, another awesome spot. Joseph Beth, of course, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, the classics. And yeah, my website is just my name, jennabeallmueller.com. And my Instagram handle, I think it's the same. It might be Jenna Beall Mueller, right? But I'm pretty easy to find that way.
So thank you again for all of our listeners for being here tonight. And next time on Everyday Writers, we're going to be talking about world building. So see you then. And don't forget that every day is a good day to write.